So we've got Anthony. How you doing there, Anthony?
Hey, how you doing?
Okay. Well, I'm doing
Yeah.
all right. I mean, I'm sick. I got mucus running out of my head. So if you see me, muting or whatever, if I try to die of choking on mucus, that's it. But anyways,
Yeah, I called yesterday, but I was having technical issues with my phone connection, so hopefully today's a little better. If there's issues, just please let me know. But I was talking with Forrest and Matt about evolution, and I asked them for evidence of it. We never really got around to the real evidence, in my opinion, but I kind of want to change the topic a little bit and just try to see if you all accept the premise that for atheism to be true, evolution and abiogenesis must necessarily be true. Do you all agree with that notion?
I have my thoughts, but Derek, do you have any ideas on this?
Yeah, I don't know how to feel about the way that you framed that. It, the evidence, as I understand it, for evolution via natural selection is so compelling, it's so undeniable, from my point of view, that is that's at least part of what leads me not to believe that a deity would have been necessary to have created man, ex nihilo, or however you kids describe it in the theology department. So, and as far as abiogenesis goes, I mean, I don't think even the scientific community knows for certain how or what kick-started that process. But I know that to kind of jump the gun and say, well, we don't know what was behind that, therefore it must have been a miracle, is clearly an argument from ignorance. It's got to be gaps. So, yeah, just given my understanding of evolution via natural selection, I just don't see any good reason to credit creationism, if that makes sense.
Okay. Yeah, I understand that, but go ahead.
Yeah. So I have difficulties with how you phrased it, because for one thing, like atheism to be true, atheism is just simply a description of whether or not somebody believes in a God. That has no connection as to whether or not like a God actually exists. It's just what that person doesn't believe in, and they don't believe in a deity. As far as atheism goes, as far as abiogenesis and evolution goes, I don't usually like pure dichotomies like this unless it's like a proposition and then its negation, right? And this is obviously not that. So I feel like making this kind of dichotomy here is not considering like the possibility that God could have used abiogenesis and evolution, I guess, in order for everything to come up, or a deistic God. But also I think that evolution as we understand it today, it can change and it can become something different than we understand it. And so I wouldn't say that abiogenesis and evolution must be true in order for atheism or there to be no God to be a true fact. I think that those things are kind of opposite. I think that abiogenesis and evolution being true, as the evidence has shown us, because like Derek said, evolution has mountains of evidence behind it, which proves that evolution has happened in the past. That's how we got diversity of life on Earth. And that's evolution is still happening now. And abiogenesis, while we don't have all of the steps of abiogenesis yet, like proven in the lab or anything like that, the most likely conclusion is that abiogenesis, being a natural process, is the way that life started, at least here on Earth. It may be a different process elsewhere. I mean, we don't know. We don't have enough information to say one way or the other. But I think that both of those things can be true and God still exists. And I also think that both of those things can be true and God not exist, but those aren't the only options, if that makes sense.
Okay. Yeah. All right. So there was a lot of points made there. So as you, I'm sorry, I wasn't sure who was speaking. I'm on the phone. I can't. I'm not looking at a computer screen or anything. But for who said that one of the reasons that you think a creator is not necessary is because of your conviction that evolution is so overwhelmingly true, and presumption that haven't figured it out yet, but abiogenesis is true. Likewise, it's for the theist. I feel like the reason a lot of people are theists is because when they look around and they look at life and its complexity, and many people feel like life gives the appearance, at least the appearance, of having been designed. That's what keeps many people in the theist mindset. So my opinion
can I
is
pause
that
right here?
Excuse me?
Can I pause you right here? Because I'm just
Okay,
kind of
go ahead.
curious if you could define for me what it means for something to look designed. Could you define what that means to you?
Basically, for something to look like it was designed, is as opposed to something that was a result of purely naturalistic forces acting upon matter. So the blind forces of matter just kind of blowing atoms around in space. The gravity, electromagnetism, the nuclear.
I'm sorry to interrupt, Anthony. I'm sorry to interrupt. You're not answering my question. Can you describe what it means to be designed? Because, for instance, with your, I'll repeat my question here in a second, but I'll show. I feel like an explanation is necessary. So, we know the natural processes that go into plants developing. We know the natural reasons why plants develop in the way that they do, with the pollen and the pistil and all of that, with the different designs that bees can see, and why those particular plants and those particular designs, on the petals and everything like that, why they survived and others didn't in certain areas and everything like that. So, I mean, if we have a natural explanation for how something came about, then we don't need a God in there in order to explain how it came about. Because, and maybe you can answer this question for me first. Is God necessary for rain to occur?
No, I would say no.
Okay, that's a natural process that's explained naturally by through natural means. Now, this I use that as a simple example, but it can be applied throughout anything that you see in the natural world. So what I'm looking for in this and what I'm asking you is to define what it means to be designed. What does it mean to be designed? To you, I could tell you what it means to me, but I want to hear what you say first.
Yeah, I feel like there could be a number of criteria I could mention. I think one of the main features of a designed, I'll just use the word system, is that it's a system of components and parts, each of which is necessary for the whole to function. And if you take one of the parts away, then the system as a whole ceases to function. It's very hard for naturalistic mechanisms to create even simple functioning systems like that. So,
that's not even true. I'm sorry, that's not even true. Can you name one particular system in nature that can't operate with, all of the parts?
Yeah, like a living being, like an organism. So a cell or
that doesn't
an animal.
a cell.
So an organism, think about a cell. It has a nucleus. It has the. Go ahead.
So, I mean, are you trying to tell me that even the simplest single-celled organisms don't exist, that have very few moving parts and all this other stuff? Like, those don't exist to you?
They exist. They're systems. Every living organism that we know of is a system of probably thousands or millions of independent but mutually necessary functioning parts. This is why humans have not even come close to creating a living cell in a lab from scratch, if I could use that terminology. There's so many parts, and there's
No, that's not even true. So typically, whenever somebody brings up specified
what's
complexity,
what's not true?
What's not true is that you can't remove a single part of any of these organisms,
Okay.
and they won't operate, because you can we don't know how the first cells originally evolved. They probably, and I believe more than likely, evolved without a nucleus at first, and then later on, it just proved more advantageous for that to happen, because on the best explanations that we have for the results of abiogenesis, I'm thinking of the RNA world kind of theory, which isn't the only idea out there as far as a scientific hypothesis for the beginning of life, the beginning of single-celled organisms. They didn't exactly have nucleuses and all this other stuff in there.
How do you know that? How do you know that? Because are there any organisms that operate today without with only RNA?
That has nothing to do with how life first evolved, and this is a hypothesis. It's not.
Why do you?
We have it
Hold
proven.
on. I just want to. You all say you believe in science, which is what we observe, and you are giving credence to RNA world hypothesis, which says the earliest organisms operated only in RNA. How do you? We have never observed an organism that can self-replicate only using RNA. So why would you believe that that's something that's possible?
Because the hypothesis has explanations for how they would operate.
We have never observed.
No, you're not going to do this. You're not going to do this, Anthony. You're not going to sit there and interrupt me. I was speaking. I politely interrupted you, asking you if I could stop and everything. So you're muted right now. But so I forgot what in the fuck I was going to say. But essentially, whenever somebody comes up with this kind of argument that you can't take out individual components and you'll end up with something that doesn't function or something like that, and that's a sign of design. Typically, they talk about the bacterial flagellum, but the thing is that we've actually been able to remove certain components of the bacterial flagellum, and all it seems to do is actually manipulate its mobility. And this has been seen throughout nature and throughout the studies. Now, you were kind of being a little shitty there about how, oh, you guys prefer science and all this other stuff, and you're adhering to this hypothesis. Yes, it's a hypothesis that has yet to be disputed, and it will remain a hypothesis until we have evidence for it. But the reason why I side with the more naturalistic explanation is because everything that we've experienced so far, everything that we once thought was some magical god that was doing it, has later been proven to be a natural process. Abiogenesis, therefore, is the most likely conclusion to that. So while we don't know, and we don't have the specific evidence we would need in order to say that we know, and this turns into more of a scientific theory rather than a hypothesis, even though we don't have that, we can still be pretty secure that that's most likely the way that it happened, because we have yet to prove that magic is real. So I'm gonna Derreck, do you have any thoughts before I unmute Anthony here?
I've got a couple actually. And I haven't looked at this. I haven't had to bother with any of this stuff for quite some time. But it's bringing back some memories of things I used to delve into. But the Kitzmiller versus Dover area school district court case that this took place during, I think it was during the Bush administration. So this is quite some time ago, when the intelligent design proponents were trying to inject their rebranded creationism into public schools. And George W. Bush, he actually appointed a conservative judge appointed by George W. Bush, a believing Christian, presided over this. And in the end, the intelligent design proponents got their asses handed to them. I mean, mightily. And one of the evolutionary biologists who was very pivotal in all this was Dr. Kenneth Miller. So Anthony, or whoever else is listening, I implore you to check out the work of Dr. Kenneth Miller, an evolutionary biologist. You can find his videos on YouTube, where all of this stuff, it got its, I hate to say it, Anthony, but this is really old news. Like, this is old, stale stuff. And the bacterial flagellum, of course, was one of Michael Behe's favorite examples of irreducible complexity, is the very argument that Anthony is trying to foist here. And this stuff was debunked. Kenneth Miller knew damn well, if you take a bacterial flagellum and you remove some of the components or parts, you still have functionality. So the kinds of things that Michael Behe, the creationist, was trying to argue back then, just turned out to be utterly false. And we still have somebody like Anthony on the line trying to promulgate this stuff because you people refuse to learn. The other thing I heard there was something of a false dichotomy, the thinking that if nature's responsible for producing complexity or living organisms, that just doesn't make sense because nature is just pure chaos and randomness, right? Well, that's actually not true. I think the analogy that was used by a creationist back in the day is that you wouldn't expect a tornado to go, sweeping through a junkyard and to just put together an automobile, to try and say that nature's just not capable of putting together fully functional, complex organisms. Well, that's not a proper understanding of how evolution via natural selection works. The process is like this: the genetic mutations that occur and get passed on, yes, that is purely random. The mutations themselves happen utterly randomly. It is random. The process of natural selection is non-random. It is not random. If you understand how natural selection works, it is a non-random process. These mutations, give rise to new features and characteristics that will either survive in a given environment and therefore be passed on to progeny and continue down the line, or those mutations will give rise to characteristics or features that are disadvantageous in a given environment. And those features will be discarded as those organisms die off or don't live long enough to procreate. That's how natural selection works, and that is a non-random process. So you have to understand that evolution via natural selection involves both randomness and non-randomness, and that's how we get accumulative changes that give rise to complexity and functionality.
All right. Anthony, you're being unmuted. All right. So you're unmuted. I know that was a lot to handle, but do you have any ideas?
Yeah, so I didn't bring up Behe or the flagellum. Every living
You didn't need to.
organism
It's
is
the
a
same stuff. You're regurgitating the same stuff. It's the same old shit, Anthony. It's you don't need
okay.
to.
Well, all right. Well, let's go with it. So every living system is a complex system of systems. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I'm fine with that, Anthony.
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, not every system within the system is going to be necessary, but we're still let's look at humans, for example. Humans are a system, their whole body, and you have a number of other systems within the system that are either essential or beneficial, like eyes, and which are not necessary, but take lungs. Lungs are a system which is within a system, and if you take the lungs out, the human's going to die. And with the heart and many other organs, the brain. So we have systems within systems. And my point was that natural forces have a very hard. And well, go ahead. Yeah. All right.
Well, I was just gonna say. So you bring up lungs as being a necessary system in humans, and I feel like you're presenting, I guess, a false analogy here because you're essentially talking about taking a system that has evolved to work the way that it does, and you're just arbitrarily pulling out some part of it, right? But what you're not considering is the fact that there was a lot of evolution that went up to that point, which includes animals that don't have lungs, and so
they function.
Like
they function in other ways.
Right.
Exactly.
But you're totally ignoring the point that these lungless animals are part of our evolutionary history. You can't attack evolution by ignoring most of the argument for evolution and most of the argument for how we evolved. Like you're sitting there and you're taking the final product and being like, well, if I rip this out, then it don't work. And you're like, boom, drop mic, evolution shit, believe in God now, motherfuckers. I mean, that is just not ever going to be compelling.
All I'm trying to establish is that humans, or giving an example, I'm not saying that's proof of evolution being false. I'm just trying to establish that humans are a system of systems. And the original question was, what is design? And I'm just trying to say that a design object is one that has, multiple systems, each of which is either necessary or, very beneficial to the whole. So,
okay. Let me stop you right there, because I guess that's a definition of what you could mean by design. But as you just said, our human bodies are a system of systems, right? And we have natural explanations for how our bodies evolved. We have natural explanations for how our bodies work, and we have natural explanations for how our bodies break down. Me with diabetes, I can explain, like, my pancreas is fucked. But my point is that we have natural explanations for these things, so we don't need a God in order to explain it. Therefore, that makes our bodies natural systems, which are a natural system of systems, and therefore are not designed if they're naturally produced. So that is not a good definition.
That's the entire question that is at the basis of everything. Is did they evolve? Could they have evolved? And the whole problem is that natural forces cannot arrange these things over time, and they would
It's
also
already
have
been
to be
explained to you why that's wrong.
Let me say one more thing.
Listen, if you're not going to listen when somebody explains the fallacy in your arguments, then I don't give a shit about hearing anything else you have to say. I already explained to you why when nature does things, it is not always purely chaos and randomness. And that went right through your ear, through your head, and out the other. You people don't listen when we explain things to you. This is why I don't like doing these stupid debates. You guys don't listen. I'm done with you, Anthony.
Am I allowed to speak?
Go ahead. I'm checking out.
Go ahead. We're gonna
Okay.
we're gonna try to
Yeah,
wrap up this because we can't go for hours on this particular topic. So
Okay.
Lord.
I forgot what I was going to say, but we never answered my original question about whether abiogenesis is necessary for atheism to be true.
we didn't get to that because you can't seem to define what you mean by designed. You can't tell me what it means for one object to be designed and one object to be not designed. I think that's because on creationism everything has to be designed. And so there's no way to distinguish between designed and undesigned objects, which makes your hypothesis unfalsifiable. And that's just not that's never going to be a good hypothesis to bring up in a scientific discussion.
And I forgot. I remember what I was going to say, which is that not only does a system have to exist, but in the case of living organisms, it's encoded in the DNA as a system of written instructions, which also seems. And when you're talking about natural selection, it's not just a tornado in a junkyard just randomly blowing things around, and you get the final product right at in one event. That's true, but we have to ask ourselves: can the tornado create these beneficial adaptations?
Because it's not a tornado, Anthony. Did you not understand anything that I said? I'm saying the tornado analogy is a false analogy. And here you're still trying to use the example of a tornado. This is proof that you're not getting it because you're so dead set on trying to prove your theism for whatever goofy emotional reasons that you don't listen when people explain things to you. This is why I can't stand dealing with you theists. I'm here on the show for shits and giggles, but you people are impossible. It's why I don't like dealing with you anymore. You're impossible.
Okay. Well, yeah, it sounds to me like you're not able to answer my questions and you're getting upset. So I think that's part of the problem.
I'm genuinely annoyed. Yes.
No, Anthony, it's not that we can't answer your questions. We've been able to answer your questions and tell you like the many fallacies that you're using. We're able to tell you why it's not convincing, why like even your definition of what it means to be designed doesn't make sense. So it's not that we can't answer you. It's that you don't like the answers you're getting. And that's it.
Right.
That's all.
But I still love you.
What's up?
Anthony.
No, he dropped.
Don't you fucking leave me, Anthony. Don't you leave me like this.
He dropped. We were wanting to know, Anthony. Fuck.
I'm sorry, John. I just can't with these people, man. Like you tell them, you explain the fallacy in their reasoning, and they just it's gone. It's the same old song and dance. Lord.
I mean, it really is. I mean, I feel like we were going around in circles by the end of that.
Oh yeah.
And
absolutely.
And he just really wasn't listening, and he didn't. And I really think that's what it is. They don't like the answers that they get, so they're just like, "Oh, well, you can't answer me." It's like, no.
Yeah, I mean, once they're up against the wall, all they can do is yeah.
It's like I'm not providing them the scripted answer they want me to give them, so I can't answer them, and that's just totally ridiculous. And I really like.
I flat out told you it's not a tornado, and you're still pushing the tornado analogy. Like, what the fuck, dude? Like what?
So, Anthony did call back in because he said he lost the call. Do you have any interest in really engaging him again?
Not really. But you can take the call if you like. I don't care.
Oh, okay. Anthony, we're going to bring you back on, but we're not going to spend too much time. Something happened, and we'll let you have some final thoughts here, but we're not going to spend too much time. Okay. All right. Hey there,
Okay.
Anthony.
Yeah. Sorry about that. A call got dropped, so I understand you probably don't. Oh, you got rid of me. Now I'm back, so probably be boring to keep doing the same thing. But I did want to kind of, as far as I could, try to get to the bottom of what we were talking about until you all get tired of me. So I do want to go back to the original question I asked, which is, if atheism, for atheism to be true, it must necessarily also be true that evolution and abiogenesis are true. And since you all are so convinced by the evidence, I don't see why you wouldn't accept that premise. I don't think you ever really answered that question.
Well, so I feel like I did. It's a malformed question. Atheism, like atheism being true, isn't a thing. If you want to talk about God, not for God to not exist, then abiogenesis and evolution have to be true. I don't necessarily agree with tagging both of those things together, and so that's another way that the question's malformed. I just don't think that we need to mix the idea that God doesn't exist with the scientific hypothesis of abiogenesis and the scientific theory of evolution. I think that God could not exist and both of those things be true. And I think that God could exist and both of those things still be true, which means that they're not connected in any kind of way, and therefore is yet again a malformed question.
Okay, so for a person to lack a belief in a God, it would be necessary for that person to be convinced that there's no reason for a God to exist. And therefore, that person must also be convinced that these natural processes and these natural forces are capable of creating what we observe in life today. So, would you say that's correct?
So, no. So, all it would entail is that the person is not convinced that a God exists, not that a person is convinced a God does not exist.
Right. So, how else could life have arisen if it wasn't by some sort of intelligent creator that we would call a God?
No, I'm not going around and around with you, Anthony, on this. Like, I'm really
Anthony, is the intelligent creator alive?
It would be conscious and intentional and purposeful, yes. So
is he alive?
It's aware of what it's doing. Yeah, if you want to call that alive, I would say that.
Well, how did that life arise from non-life?
We don't know. That's the thing. So the question when it comes to intelligent design, intelligent design.
Is it okay for you not to know, but then it's not okay for us to have an I don't know answer? Because that's what it seems to me. It's a double standard.
It actually is.
You have the benefit of not knowing, while we have to have all of these answers for shit.
Well, we're not trying to answer the question of what is the nature of the creator or the intelligence. We're only trying to answer the question of, was there an intelligence behind life? So the answer about how the intelligence was created does not fall within.
Anthony, here's what you're not getting. Derreck just asked you point blank, is God alive? You said yes. You're saying that life can't come out of nowhere. It has to be created by some kind of intelligence, which puts you in a bind, saying that God is alive. So therefore, if it's true in the real world, I guess, then your God, being an aspect of this real world, he also cannot just come from nowhere. So then where did your God come from? Is there some other jackass God that is not alive in some kind of way that created him?
Because you basically end up with an infinite regress.
Right, and
Yeah.
or you can specially plead that your God has been eternal all this time, which is just you specially making up this special class of entity out there that doesn't have to be constrained by anything and somehow exists outside of time and space for all of eternity, which doesn't make sense to me. How can you exist outside of time and space and have any kind of like agency about you, like, or exist in any kind of way? Like, that makes no fucking sense to me. So I feel like the things that you're purporting here are just putting you in an even deeper bind. And I feel like you need to think about a few things. I guess you need to think about what it means to be alive. I mean, that's something that we deal with when classifying like viruses. Are viruses alive, or are they not? Like, that's a serious question in the medical community, and I guess in evolutionary biology. And then you also need to think about what does it mean to be designed, because you still have yet to give us an actual definition for what it means to be designed. The way that you described being designed, or items that are designed before, don't actually describe anything that's designed. So it seems to me like you need to think about your position on a few things. And I hope that you will come back, maybe to talk to Forrest or Erica, or somebody that is far more knowledgeable on this topic. Because like I've got a surface level understanding of this. I'm an
Yeah,
engineer, so I
y'all,
can understand these
so,
complex
so
topics.
y'all run. So are y'all running? Are y'all running?
We're
No,
scared
see,
shitless, Anthony. We're running, buddy.
no, I dropped him. No, you don't come back after I told you, hey, you need to think about a few things here because you can't even define what design means, and then be like, are you running? And it's like, no, I'm not fucking running. Jesus fucking Christ. Anyways,
Hey, it's Jimmy Snow here. I'm the executive producer on the line with a fun fact. Did you know 100% of the hosts of this channel enjoy eating? It's true. And if you would like to help contribute to their ongoing addiction, you can do so by going over to Patreon or becoming a channel member. There are show-specific, host-specific tiers. Those are awesome. But also, you can leave a super thanks with a special little highlighted comment. You can like, comment, and subscribe. All of those will help fill our whittle bellies. By the way, check out some of this content over here. Algorithm, what next?